and welcome back to the Escape Down Under podcast, coming to you from beautiful Adelaide after stage 3 of the men's Santos Tour Down Under. My name's Matt de Neef. I'm joined again by Rupert Guinness. Rup, hello.
Hey Matt, it's great to be here. Beautiful evening, outdoors, and seeing some great racing before our very eyes.
I'll get you to set the scene in a moment because it is a lovely scene. Ronan, Laughlin, hello.
Hello. How's it going?
Good. I feel like I haven't seen you in a few days. You've been so busy.
Well, I could say the same for you, yeah.
That's true. We're all busy bees, aren't we, running around? As Rup said, lovely evening this evening. We're outside. We aren't by the pool deck like we were a couple of nights ago. Rup, do you want to set the scene for us where we are and what's happening?
Yeah, look, we're at Kings Park in Adelaide.
Victoria Park.
Yes, Victoria Park. Yeah, you're just catching up with me. Victoria Park, just on the outskirts of the Adelaide CBD. And the women's criterium is on. And it's a really strong field here, big numbers, and all the teams are present. And we've already seen a couple of breakaways, and you can see the hurt on a lot of the riders' faces. So it's a beautiful evening, nice and warm. Big crowd here actually, just at the grandstand there, and I can tell you the beer line is long. It was so long I didn't have time to supply myself before we did this podcast.
Yeah, so while the women's Tour Down Under is only 3 stages long, there is this unofficial 4th stage, which is a criterium a few days later. Most, if not all, the teams have stuck around, so it is, as Rup said, a really strong field. We've seen Amanda Spratt off the front, we've seen Grace Brown off the front, Brodie Chapman, Sarah Gigante's in there as well, the winner of the women's Tour Down Under. So a great field, lovely evening, and perfect for talking about some bike racing. Why don't we go back to stage 2 to start with? We've got a lot to talk about, but stage 2, we had an attack from the gun with Australia's Luke Burns getting off the front with Geordie Christian Vanderlei from EF, and they were basically out front for the entire day. I think they were caught with 20 kilometres to go, ahead of the most decisive point in the day, we so thought anyway, the Fox Creek climb with 10Ks to go. And 3 years ago, when this race was the Santos Festival of Cycling, Luke Plapp made his move there and got away and won the stage solo. And he tried a similar thing yesterday as well. And he ended up getting away there, didn't he, Ronan?
Sorry, I got distracted by a song blaring over the PA there from a band from my hometown, the Undertones from Derry, Teenage Kicks.
Okay.
So sorry.
But you didn't expect to hear that.
I was just trying to confirm my ears weren't deceiving me, but I mean, yeah, pretty big hit, so not surprising.
There you go.
As for Luke Plapp's attack, yeah, I actually we were travelling at that point, and I came across a stage with about 6 or 7 K to go, and he was still away with Navarez from Ineos.
Yeah, former teammate.
Yeah, I mean, great to see him giving it a go, but it's sort of when you've seen then Alaphilippe go afterwards, and just the speed was so high. It's as much as I think all the Australian audience and fans were willing him on, it probably was a tough ask to given just the stage finish.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to Plapp afterwards, and you could see actually as it unfolded that he refused to work with Narvaez off the front because he was worried about getting rolled in the sprint. And he said in an interview afterwards that there were 2 riders that his team staff told him he couldn't work with if he got away over the top, and that was Narvaez and also Corbin Strong, the only 2 riders. So when
he couldn't work with.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, because they were worried that he would get rolled in the sprint and therefore lose bonus seconds, which would then affect possibly the GC overall.
Yes.
So you can imagine his disappointment when one of those 2 riders got away with him.
You got to think though, like surely Jaco or confident that Luke Plapp can distance those 2 riders on some of the climbing coming up in the following stages.
You would think so.
Better to whittle it down to 1 or 2 riders to beat than the entire peloton being on the same time.
Yeah, you would think so. I guess they played it very conservatively. But yeah, you can imagine his frustration when there's only 2 riders he couldn't work with, and one of them happens to get there.
Yeah, that's a sort of a 50% call going against you for sure, isn't it? Because he obviously had the intent there, but Navarez obviously is in great form. You saw it's not just that he won the criterium on Saturday night, but how he won it. He was one of the first guys in that breakaway, and to stay away in a breakaway like that is really hard in any.
Is it the first time a break stayed away in that criterium?
From my memory, now people may question my memory, but from my memory, it's certainly the first time in a long time, and and it was a great effort. You saw how that breakaway it formed, and then it grew in a couple of numbers, and then the fact that they still stayed away. You saw the work that Borough Hansgrohe did in that criterium to try and bring back the break, and they couldn't. So he's obviously on great form. So, as you said, something for him to be in the breakaway with Plapp, it's like, oh, of all the people.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, perhaps that's what it is, because actually when you think back to that criterium, it was raced like a no holds barred criterium would be, in that it was from the gun. There was a track rider attack literally as the gun went off, and there was no early break or no break that was allowed to slip off the front and then chase down. It was full gas attacking left, right and centre. Every time they came past us in the pits, it was, the pace was up, and that was what kind of impressed me about Navarre's win, was that not only was he able to infiltrate and kind of instigate the breakaway that was successful, but actually then he came from like fifth wheel or something in that sprint and won the sprint convincingly. And that, it sort of was one of those mental checks that you make ahead of a race like Tour Down Under, that, oh, there's a guy who's clearly in form.
Yes,
definitely.
And obviously Jaco had made the same sort of check that, Plappy. I don't know what the nicknames are down here, but if you get away with this guy, he's maybe one we won't find so easy to get rid of.
Also, just it's no coincidence, I think, from what I just said about the form, the criterium showing form. We've got our current race leader; he was in that breakaway, too. So the criterium has actually shown in hindsight. It's shown a lot more than what a criterium normally would do, with a view to the form guide of what we're seeing unfold here in the Tour.
Yeah. So that Plapp and Narvaez move ended up being caught. There are a few more attacks that followed that, including a big one from Quinn Simmons, which looked quite dangerous. But ultimately, with about a kilometre to go, with a couple of riders still off the front, it was Isaac Del Toro, who Roop just alluded to there, who put in really quite a staggering move. When you see the overhead footage of his attack, he comes from a long way back, bridges up to the remaining leaders like they're standing still, and then just goes on with it. And somehow, in his second day of World Tour racing as a 20-year-old, managed to hold off the sprinters. It was a pretty remarkable finish, I thought.
Yeah, it was hugely impressive. The move he made, I don't know if it was timed to perfection or happened to work out, but to make a move like that, come around the outside of the peloton just as they're catching the breakaway, and then take a sort of slipstream slingshot off that doomed breakaway, and then hold it all the way to the line. Like there was a few different sort of thoughts under my mind watching. I was like, first of all, I was like, wow, and then secondly, I was like, wow, if he can do that, he is the only person with the legs in that peloton right now who can do that. If anybody else could have followed, they probably would have. Yeah. And thirdly, it's like it's his second day as a pro bike rider, and I kind of wonder then, is there some element of definitely not beginner's luck, because this guy's won Tour de l'Avenir.
Yeah,
but like, he didn't know what he should not be able to do, and so he just went and did what he shouldn't be able to do. Yeah, incredible ride. I wrote yesterday that you look at the Tour de l'Avenir results, where he won overall, won the points jersey, won the KOM jersey, won the best young rider jersey. You look at that and you look at the way he won it, and you go, okay, obviously he's a gun climber, because you don't win Tour de l'Avenir without being a gun climber. But he showed yesterday that he's much more than just a climber.
Yeah, certainly, and I think just his willingness to throw it out there, put it on the line like that. I was watching some footage though of him in the Tour de l'Avenir last night, and there's some great footage there of him finishing on the Col de la Loze, where he was absolutely spent at the end. But it's interesting looking at that. He was unable to say anything at the end after the Col de la Loze, which is understandable. But even after his effort yesterday, he was speechless, whether that's been in shock or fatigue.
I think they could give him like a note to the TV broadcasters, maybe give the interviews an extra minute or two, or give the writers an extra minute or two to recover before you send the interviewer down to get their thoughts. It was a big ask for the guy to make a cohesive response, given what had just happened and the intensity of that attack.
It's a great result for Mexican cycling.
It really is.
Back in the 80s and early 90s, I used to cover Raul Alcala, and he was a great rider and a great personality. And I know he's already messaged a couple of times on his Facebook, about him and how excited he is for Mexican cycling. So that story is going to unravel hopefully, and we'll hear more of him. And I'm sure we'll hear of Raul Alcala, because he was the real last big superstar cyclist that was in Europe from Mexico. So bring it on.
14 rider break, forging clear here in this criterium.
Yeah, Grace Brown on the front. Dangerous little move.
Kind of looking at it thinking, is it too big? But then I think every major team was represented there, so the peloton seemed to be kind of almost entirely sitting up there.
Yeah,
as they passed us at least.
It's been interesting watching the response to Del Toro's win yesterday. I think it's natural for people to get pretty excited when a rider that young does something that unexpected and that powerful, really. It does feel like there's a bit of a danger of maybe overhyping it and putting a bit too much pressure on the guy. Like he is just started his career, and it'd be nice to give him a bit of time just to work into his career.
Let's give him 3 Tour de France's, will we now?
Okay,
and give him,
well, he's already
maybe a Giro.
He's already the next Pogacar, so
okay.
He might be the next Merckx by next week. Who knows?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he is. We may as well just give it to him now.
Yeah, okay. Just get it out of the way and we can just move on with it. Yeah.
I don't know, give him a few million and
he can be
all
himself later.
You were talking, Rupert, earlier about how he couldn't really get a thought together at the finish. He was finding it difficult. We found that as well in the press conference, didn't we, afterwards, when he fronted the press. His English is very good, but he did seem a bit overwhelmed by the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you got, as Ronan was saying, I think you got to allow him time to sort of get his head around what his achievement from yesterday. I was just talking to someone today to do another interview, Bernie Eisel. It was just about, we were just talking about past successes and everything, and how often in a cyclist's career you get a hallmark victory and you really don't get time to actually think about it and absorb it for what it means, because no sooner you get one victory, everyone's expecting the next one, and you actually don't get time to put the pause button on and do it. He was actually talking about that with referring to Sam Welsford, and saying, and even in his own career, Bernie was saying how you never really got time to celebrate the wins that you may not have achieved, but you were a critical part of, because the next race is the next day or the next week or whatever. There's no time.
I seen you talking to Bernie Eisel today when I came back, and I was actually just coming back from recording a Performance Process podcast with Ruth Edwards, who's just sort of, we had discussed that we're not going to call it a comeback in that podcast. We're going to call it the return to World Tour racing.
Very good.
But she had mentioned that also, just how difficult it was, always being sort of under pressure to move on to the next race immediately. And when she won the Brabants-Pijl, that actually, it was more of a relief than a joy. And I think it's something we sort of overlook sometimes in cycling, and other sports I think do it much better in that they tend to, a victory is worth even more sometimes than it is in cycling. So I think for me that was one of the most refreshing things to see about Del Toro yesterday, was just how excited he was and how much it meant to him, that he genuinely actually was lost for words, and wasn't saying I was lost for words and then within seconds rambling off in a well prepared and pre-recorded speech.
Yeah, I mean, there was a similar thing that happened with Sarah Gigante when she won the Women's Tour Down Under a few days ago, where I asked her in the interview afterwards, so what does this mean for your season, and does this give you confidence going ahead to bigger goals? What are your goals for the rest of the season? And to her credit, she just stopped me and was like, no, actually, I just really want to enjoy this. And I think, like you say, we are kind of guilty of that in cycling. We do project forward very quickly and very easily to think about what this win could mean. Where can we extrapolate from here to the next big thing? When will Del Toro race the Tour de France? Will Gigante race the Tour de France this year? That kind of thing. And there probably is space in the sport really for us to appreciate what we've seen for a bit longer before moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, I think so. And but then again, I guess that's the nature of, just being devil's advocate here, that's the nature of news and reporting. Everybody,
we need to report in the moment.
Everybody want to know the future before it's happened, But I agree with you in principle. I think riders should, be able to soak it in, because you never know. It could be their one and only pro win. It could be their, so many things could intervene, and of course you don't wish for that, but you're only good as your last performance. But your next performance could be something that ruins the memory of the first one. So why not just do that?
There's this terrible saying in cycling: you're only as good as your last race, which is, to call a spade is pretty bullshit. Like it's, you literally cannot win every race. And so the idea that you're only as good as your last race is bonkers. But I think it does play into the fact that riders and teams and everybody, their focus quickly turns to what is next and preparing for what's next. I was discussing this in another sport, in rugby union. I was doing a series of features on getting players to talk about and recollect their first time they earned a test cap to represent their country. And what the idea behind that came from me having a discussion with a former Wallaby who he earned 7 test caps. James Holbeck his name was, and we're talking about how it was often termed in any reference to him in stories like James Holbeck, who only played 7 times for Australia. He only won 1 test cap. Or there's people who only played for Australia once. 25 million people who never did it once.
Most people would dream of that once. And then so I thought, well, gee, that the achievement of getting that first test cap was never able to be celebrated by the player, and certainly, I guess, often wasn't recognised by the media. And no sooner do you get your first test cap, the pressure's on to keep your spot in the team. So, I think it is probably does parallel to other sports more often than we probably understand. But anyway, this is a cycling podcast. Tiddlywinks.
So De Toro won that second stage, moved into the overall lead. Interestingly, Israel Premier Tech took second and third on that second stage. He had Corbin Strong in second place, going for the sprint there, and then his teammate Stevie Williams, who I guess was trying to go for bonus seconds to help him out in the climbs later on in the race. But interesting finish there for Israel anyway.
It was, yeah, and I think the initial reaction is, well, if they were second and third, could they have done better had they focused on one rider? And I don't know they could have yesterday with the way Del Toro,
Yeah, I'm not sure it would have mattered. Stage 3, we started at Tea Tree Gully this morning and headed out to Campbelltown, just down the road actually, but they did a big loop out through the hills, about 140 kilometres. Again, it was Luke Burns who got up the road first and extended his lead in the KOM competition. He's from the Australian national team. His teammate Tristan Saunders was out there. Axel Mario from Cofidis and Stefan de Bod from EF was out there as well. They were all brought back. The last of the rise was caught with 30 kilometres to go. And then it was on to the descent down Gorge Road, the infamous descent down Gorge Road. We touched on it the other night. It's a scary bit of road. I think it's a fine descent to do on your own, but man, watching it again today, I'm just reminded of how scary that would be in the bunch. And it was nervous in there. The teams are working really hard to try and position their leaders well. And unfortunately, we saw a pretty big spill there, didn't we, Rip?
Exactly. Mr. Platt. Unfortunately for Luke Platt, he had a horrible fall. I think probably a lot of people have already seen the photos of the consequence of that fall. And obviously, at the very least, he'll be in sheer pain. But I understand he's having medical checkups at the moment as we're speaking, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that certainly before the start of stage 4. He'll, at the very least, have a very uncomfortable sleep tonight.
I was saying to you before we started recording that I can't remember worse road rash. It's been, I'm sure there has been recently, but it looked horrible.
It was particularly rough, and the surprising thing was just that Platt was caught up in it, because initially we didn't see him. There was a few Astana riders had gone down, and he was either underneath them or just out of shot or whatever, and we thought it was, very unfortunate for Astana. As it transpired, it was unfortunate for Astana, but it was also very unfortunate for Jaco, and I think the Australian fans also who have. There's a lot of support here for Platt, and obviously he's lost so much time today. His GC chances are over. I think he'll just be hoping to be able to continue participating in the race now.
But he'll also be, a vital person for Simon Yates. Who obviously is going to be waiting for the weekend's hill finishes, and I think first and foremost Luke's recovery is the most important, But if he is able to continue racing, at what level is he able to race to help Simon Yates now?
The thing about that descent as well, though, as dangerous, I'm sort of hesitant to use the word dangerous because the descent itself isn't
dangerous. Yeah.
No, the descent itself isn't dangerous, but as scary as it seems, quite often there's such a hyper awareness within the peloton that this is a point where we all have to be, on top of our game here. Everybody's safety is critical here. That you don't tend to see crashes like that all that often. It was one of those where it came up on the TV and I was sort of hesitant to watch it because you know what could happen, but at the same time I was sort of telling myself that it never really does in those places. It tends to happen in other types of descents and other scenarios, which makes it all the more unfortunate that it was such a serious crash today.
One of the teams we didn't see fighting for position on the way down Gorge Road was Spora Hansgrohe. They did a lot of the work in the chase to bring back the breakaway earlier in the day, as they have done the last couple of days, but they were seemingly out of trouble on that descent. They didn't waste any energy. They seemingly didn't waste any nervous energy on that descent. But then with about 3Ks to go, they came to the front, and from there it was just yet another textbook lead out, really.
It's great to see how that train's working for them now, and obviously the confidence is up, and obviously as gelling well, and it's still relatively early for Sam and the train to be together. But I guess if you've got the train itself already there, interesting comment that Bernie Iles was making in your story today, Matt, about don't overthink it, just trust it, and the rest will do itself. And that was probably the consequence of that advice.
Yeah, and it wasn't even don't overthink it, it was sprinters should not be thinking.
Oh, yeah.
As a sprinter, you should not think. You should be watching the wheel of your lead-out man, and that's it. And Welsford himself said that after winning the stage easily in the end, so easily that he had time to look back and see where the other guys were, and then still managed to cross the line comfortably. Welsford said that he could just not think about it. All he has to do is follow Ryan Mullen, follow Danny Van Poppel. They'll get him into the right positions. They'll get him out of trouble if they need to, and he just has to pile on the watts when he comes into the wind later on. And he did just that.
Yeah, it was only after we recorded the last podcast that I heard Danny Van Poppel's comments about we've got a fast Sam now or something to that effect, which
I heard so.
Which I thought was particularly brutal and uncalled for, because I'm sure Sam Bennett is probably sitting at home thinking, well, there's a few scenarios had I got a lead-out train like this from the same riders, I could have delivered as well. And you think back to the Vuelta a couple of years ago where he did deliver when the train was working and other times. So I like Bora team, they've been around cycling for a long time. They're obviously going to make big inroads in the coming years now with Red Bull's sort of investment in that squad. There's already talk about riders are thinking about signing and all that, so it's good to see them doing well. I just hope that's not an early indication of the success going to certain riders' heads.
I think also, mate, again, we are early in the season. It's still a long way, and I think the real test will be when, and inevitably it will happen, when the train doesn't work so well, and how they respond to that in events which, with due respect to the Santos 2 Down Under, there's bigger events as we get closer to it, even if it's midway through a Giro, for example. The pressure on the team then, and where does finger pointing happen or not then, and who ends up being the fall guy for blame if it does happen. We're not saying it will happen, but that's when the real test of all that kumbaya, calmness and trust in each other is really tested.
Yeah, exactly right. And Welsford kind of touched on that actually in his comments today. He said, it's all gone to plan so far. Everything's gone beautifully. The lead-outs have been great. I've sprinted well, but at some point that's not going to be the case. At some point we're going to get chopped out of the wheel, or we're going to miss the right lane, or something's going to happen and it's not going to work for us. So we really need to capitalise on the opportunities that we get.
You're only as good as your last lead-out.
That's very true. I mean, and also they're going to face, again, to be respectful to the riders here, they're going to face better sprinters, later in the year. There are good sprinters here for sure, but this isn't the absolute best. We haven't got Fabio Jakobsen here, we haven't got Jasper Philipsen here. There's a whole bunch of others. Mm-hmm. So when it really comes down to it, at the big one-day classics and at the Grand Tours, they're going to need that lead-out train to be spot on.
Yep.
Anything else from the sprint? I feel like it was really just the Bora Hansgrohe show. They did it so easily that they led from the front and delivered Welsford. But who else looked good in the finish there that we took note of?
I think worth a note about Elio Viviani. He's obviously coming here with intent to leave an impression. Again, going back to the criterium on Saturday night, it was interesting watching him and the Ineos guys with Garner and Swift. They were at the very back of the peloton for most of the way there, and then in one lap they suddenly moved up to the front en masse. But Viviani, he's a real seasoned campaigner. He's a smart rider.
Olympic year.
Yep, exactly, Olympic year. There's stuff to do. So I'll be very interested to see how they go tomorrow. Because obviously Saturday and Sunday is not going to be a chance for them. So that's going to possibly add more pressure on a lot, not just Ineos Grenadiers, but other teams, because it's their last crack at getting possibly a stage win. Otherwise, they're going to have to go in for a crapshoot with a breakaway in the hills if they do not have a rider for the GC in the weekend. So I think you'll see a lot more pressure tomorrow, a bit more desperation.
Some other interesting names as well up there today. Dan McClay from Arcade B&B Hotels in third place. Lawrence Pithy from Groupama FDJ. Your man, Ronan, Max Cantor, fifth in a canter.
He was at Max Cantor today.
Caleb Ewan, sixth place. Another tricky stage for him, and as we talked about before, another tough day for Jayco overall. They will not be happy with that. Biniam Gourmet, I saw some commentary online about how he finished very fast again, like he did on the opening stage. But again, he started so far back that by the time he got up to speed, it was kind of too late. There's a bit happening in the crit here, is there?
Yes, it just finished.
Yeah, they just finished. Just caught that breakaway we were talking about earlier on the final lap. So couldn't quite see who took the one. Nobody threw the hands up, but it would look like a close finish. So perhaps the riders themselves don't know who took that one. By the time you're listening to this podcast, I'm sure they'll have decided who won it.
That's the longest jury deliberation of all time, otherwise. We're going to talk about tomorrow's stage in just a moment. Before we do, Ronan, do you want to talk tech? Was there anything that you wanted to add from your travels over the last few days?
I'm not going to talk a whole lot of tech today. I'm just going to draw the listeners' attention to a special episode of, a sort of combined Geek Warning performance process episode that we recorded yesterday with JP Ballard, the CEO of Swisside, providing wheels to AG2R, Decathlon, AG2R, Le Mondial to give them their full title this season. And a man with incredible expertise in aerodynamics, background in Formula 1, established Swisside about 10 years ago. And while they are a wheel brand, actually the majority of their work comes from consultancy services that they provide to manufacturers. In terms, there's sort of a aerodynamics expertise consultancy service that they provide, or at least that was my understanding. But JP sort of set me straight and said, "Look, anything to do with performance, we're all about performance." And the podcast we recorded with him yesterday was actually just sort of roaming the pits at the Tour Down Under and sort of going through each team's different setups and their equipment and what some teams are doing really well, which teams have their sort of setups optimized pretty well, and which teams maybe could be doing a bit better. Some of the sort of design integrations that he had seen, and which, just sort of critiquing the various World Tour setups, and it was just fascinating throughout, listening to some of the things he was spotting and some of the feedback he was able to give on different designs.
Was this the 3-hour podcast you recorded?
No, so this one yesterday was 45 minutes. There's a further 3-hour podcast to come with JP. That'll probably get split into 2. I think we mentioned that in the podcast. No, I mentioned Geek Warning yesterday, recorded with Dave. There's JP's a guy I've been trying to get on the podcast for about a year or so, and never quite worked out. So when I seen him here in Adelaide, we basically took up all his time in Adelaide.
It's been very generous with his time. So I guess if you like tech and you like performance and all that,
I would say if you like racing, this week's special episode is going to be for you. If you like the sort of technical aspect of racing, then the first half of that 3-hour podcast is going to be for you. And if you would like to know how to get faster yourself without actually spending any money, the second half of that performance process podcast will be for you. So something for everybody.
I think that will appeal to everyone. I think everyone wants
Something
to go
for
faster,
everyone.
don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone wants to not spend money doing so. Rup, stage 4. You're looking at the course map in front of you there.
Yes.
We head from Murray Bridge to Port Elliot for the first time in TDU history, a stage finish in Port Elliot. On paper, it's a sprint stage. Very, very flat with only a couple of hills there, but gets pretty blowy down that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does. I've been down that way when I did the Indy Pack, Murray Bridge. And certainly it does get blowy. And a lot of that blowiness will be a bit chilly too. There's a lot of water down there, particularly as they get down towards Wellington. And anyway, I'm not sure what the weather forecast is for tomorrow, but I reckon you can expect some winds. Yeah, technically it looks like a sprinter stage. Although interestingly, there is a hill, a 3.9 average gradient on Guinness Hill, but I think that's far enough out. You know, I think if there was anything to happen, the breakaway, for example, will get caught before the finish. I think it's a slightly uphill finish for the sprint, by the look of things. So that may just test the measure of the legs of the sprinters who have been going for it so far. If any of the sprinters are starting to feel a bit of lacking some strength after 3 or 4 days of racing now in the first race of the year, that may just snap a bit out of their top end speed. I still think we're going to see a flighty, nervous finale. Again, what I said before, that it's the last crack for the sprinters teams really, and I think it'll be a thriller. I'll be keen to see who gets into the breakaway though, and for what motivations there could be behind that. So it should be an exciting day nonetheless.
I'm just looking at the weather forecast for tomorrow. Winds east to southeasterly, 15 to 20 kilometres an hour, tending southeast to southwesterly. So 15 to 20 k an hour, it's not nothing. Could be some crosswinds at some point. We can hope, right?
You could hope. It's nice to see some splits there forming, or
Perhaps
but certainly I think it's got a bit more variety in it, and obviously for some of the teams with GC riders, they just want to get there safely. I guess everyone wants to get there safely, but with a view to the race and how it'll pan out over the weekend.
Exactly right. Assuming it does come to a sprint, Welsford obviously and Bora Hansgrohe will be the ones to beat, but who else have you got your eye on for tomorrow?
Definitely Caleb Ewan, because the pressure's on now. I mean, of course it's only the first race of the season, a lot to unpack for the rest of the year, but Caleb will be, and the team will be wanting him to finish this first race with a good result, to see an improvement in what we've seen so far. So hopefully Caleb is actually getting in better health, and he'll be able to produce that. But again, form doesn't lie either. If you've got it or haven't got it, and there's strong people ahead of you, you're not going to get an overnight miracle either.
I think there's going to be a sprint before the sprint tomorrow, and after the 2 intermediate sprints. I'm trying to be confusing, but
yep, you succeeded.
You mentioned 20k an hour southeast, I think you said.
Yep.
And what that means is for the majority of the stage, they're the early parts of the stage, they're slight potential for crosswinds, but for the final 20k from Ashburn to Gulwa. Yep, they're going to have a headwind, and that won't offer much possibility for crosswinds. But then with about 6 kilometres to go, the peloton will take a sharp right, and it's right along the coast. Perfect conditions for side tailwind.
Oh yeah.
And I would think that any team especially a team like Bora with that kind of firepower, Quick Step with their history, Jayco depending on how Plap is and where Yates is positioned, but teams like that they'll want to try and make the most of that opportunity there. And if the wind is anything like I've seen in Adelaide the last few days, when there's basically been no wind forecast and it's been exceptionally windy, I think there will be fireworks along that final section, the final 6 kilometres or so tomorrow, where it's close enough to the finish where a lot of teams to have confidence that they can cause splits there and sustain it to the finish, and also close enough to the finish that all the teams will be hyper paranoid about that. So but 6k to go, expect a fight to get into position there.
And if I could just say, now I can't remember the exact year, but when Cameron Meyer won the 2 Down Under, he was riding for Garmin, and there was a breakaway on a sort of a similar sort of day. And so there's something to be learnt from those days, the reminder that unless those teams really stay on their toes and really are attentive to everything, there is potential with the right conditions for a breakaway to not rob the race, but to certainly cause an upset. When I remember that day when Cameron Meyer was in that breakaway, and nobody was expecting a breakaway. So I'm covering all my bases now. I think I did say a bunch sprint, but it's just worth remembering. So it'd be great to have Cameron Meyer here with us, be able to tell us how those sort of things can unfold and how you take advantage of when you can see teams perhaps napping, and that's the moment to go. So
hopefully we see something like that tomorrow. I'm getting excited now that you've given us that preview. So it looks like Gulwa is the point. There's a right turn there as they head west about around 10 k's to go, it looks like. So keep an eye out for that one for sure. And then stage 5, Christie's Beach to Willunga. Willunga Hill is back. We had a year without it, which was all very weird. We go back.
Was there a reason for that, or was it just?
I think just wanting to mix it up. Okay. Stewie O'Grady, the race director, wanted to throw in a bit of a different finish with Mount Lofty, and he took out Willunga for a year, and now Lofty is still in, and Willunga is back. So
I heard him talking today. He was at a presentation, and Stuart O'Grady was talking about the stage. What stage are you on today? Stage 3 today. So the stage 2 finished where Del Toro won, and it's something he had been hoping to do since before COVID, I think.
Yeah.
And sort of the balance that he has to find between finding a hard enough stage to provide action like we've seen yesterday, an exciting finish like that, but not so hard that the riders are going away from Tour Down Under saying, it's got too hard now, I'm not going back there for another year. And obviously it is getting, compared to Tour Down Under to the Tour Down Under 20 years ago, it's very, very serious these days. If they didn't want it to be too hard, it shouldn't have been made World Tour. But he was also saying about how he has to factor in that it could have been an incredibly warm day, all these other factors that go with it, and the difficulty he has in trying to find a route that will provide action and also provide what the teams want, which is an introduction to their season effectively. So interesting that Willunga is back after being dropped, and I would say part of that is probably just the fact that it's so well known now that without it, you kind of I wonder, did that have any impact on general excitement levels about the race? Because
I also think it's a platform for crowds to go to. Participation of crowds is obviously really important for a bike race, and they are always flocked there in years past. And when there's a new climb or a new finish, there's a bit of uncertainty there. So when people know, yes, it's back, I'm sure they'll get out there, and while at the same time they'll be out there, for Mount Lofty finish as well, because whatever happens on Saturday is going to certainly set up a real mighty tussle for Sunday's finale.
So Willunga is back, and we return to a familiar circuit there through McLaren Vale, Aldinga Beach, some very well-known names there in TDU history. We do 2 times up Willunga. This is a 3-kilometre climb at 7.5%, and then the race finishes at the top of that second ascent. Who are we looking at on Willunga? We've talked about Simon Yates. Who else have you got your eye on, Rip?
Oh, look, certainly Simon Yates. Obviously going to be interesting to see on the assumption that Del Toro will still be in the lead after tomorrow, but to see how he can defend the jersey, but he's got to deal with tomorrow first. So we put enough pressure on him already, haven't we? So because he's got those 6 tours he's going to win later in his career.
I thought it was 7.
maybe he'll call it a day after winning Tour Down Under.
He's peaked early.
He'll always be able to say he won the Tour.
That's right.
The Australian Ross.
I think on the GC, it's like you said, there's Alaphilippe. I'm still not sure whether he's, I know he's played down his intent of being here, but certainly I'm keen to see what sort of form he is in here now. And you know what, it'd be great to see him have a crack, even though I know he says he's got his eyes on somewhere else, but on other races. But nonetheless, if he is in good form, and he is a rider who obviously explained how he likes to attack and not just sit there and get bored and race, as well, by Saturday and Sunday, he's had 4 days of racing in a peloton. Hopefully he's bored enough that he's going to unleash hell on Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah, we saw him attack on stage 2, which was great, and he didn't have the same sort of punch or acceleration that he has shown on numerous occasions when he's soloed away to those amazing victories. But so good to see him in amongst it, and yeah, I hope he's in there as well on Willunga. And while I don't think it's a stage that he can win, given some of the other riders here, I think if he's in the mix, that'll be a great thing for the race.
What about his compatriot, Lilian Carmajan? You know, he's a guy who could be worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, Tour de France stage winner.
Yeah.
Who's that, sorry?
Calmajan.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep, strong rider for
George
sure.
Bennett, I don't know what sort of form he's in now. That's the thing. We haven't, a lot of these guys, we haven't got any indicators of what form they've got at the moment. So at the very least, Saturday will give some indication.
Yeah, 2 riders I wanted to mention. I'm not sure if I mentioned them on the podcast last time, but Derek G and Oscar Onley. So Derek G from Israel Premier Tech and Oscar Onley from DSM Firmenich Post NL. Those 2 both.
We're not calling them that.
What's that?
I'm not calling them that.
No? What are you calling
them? DSM.
DSM, fair enough. Both of those 2 guys set top 10 times on the Willunga climb on Strava in training. So
top 10 times of all time.
Of all time.
Yeah.
Exactly. In training. So that bodes very well. Oscar Onley is a young Scottish guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Strong climber. So very keen to see how he goes there. And Derek G, well, we know what he's capable of at the Giro last year, wasn't it? Second. He was capable of second.
That was harsh.
Harsh, but accurate. So, yes, Derek G.
Cohen Bowman's one name that jumps out of the start list to me as a potential for Willunga, I'm not sure. But the one I really want to see do well is Archie Ryan.
Yeah,
first pro race. Your man. Ideally suited to any climb, anywhere. Size 44 frame, as we found out.
Seems like a nice lad too.
Yeah, he is, and he actually just an incredible talent. The listeners might not be aware of him because he is, third day pro at this point. But he's a rider who's been struck with a lot of injury over the last 3 or 4 years. He was on the Jumbo-Visma development squad throughout that time, and each time he'd come back from a long layoff, I'm talking 6 months or so with a knee injury, he'd immediately be successful. We've got
some absolute clowns in front of us here.
A couple of Aussies. Also worth mentioning is Jack Haig. See how he goes in the hills.
Yep.
And
Yep.
Simon Clark.
Simon Clark.
I mean, he's not, he's in reasonable form at the Nationals, but see what sort of plans he's got.
I feel like Simon Clark's a guy who's in reasonable form all the time. He's just such a strong bike racer.
I was just going to say that Archie, having come back from injury and been immediately successful, he won his first pro race while he was still a stagiaire, having had a long injury layoff before that, and then in last year, having had a 9-month injury layoff, he came back and won a stage 11 year fairly quickly. So I'm thinking all the riders have had a 3-month layoff since the racing season ended. Perhaps that's why he could rock up and win on Willunga, because he doesn't need much racing to be going well.
Do you think he can win in Willunga?
He's got all the characteristics, yeah. I would say he's certainly, I mean, I don't want to say he's a Richie Porte style rider, but they've definitely got similarities. So yeah, don't see why not. He's got the talent also, and as I said, my main reason for suggesting him here is I would like to see him go well. I know he's a very, very good young fella, as we would say. He's a civil young fella, but he also sort of, with the path that he has taken to get to the pro ranks and all the injury he had to overcome, it would just be nice to see him do well now. Yep,
love that. Hope he goes well. I hope we get a good stage on stage 5. We will be back after that, stage 5, to talk about, everything that's happened between now and then, and look forward to the final stage. Is there anything else you guys wanted to add before we wrap this up?
Deeply upset with how cold I am in Adelaide.
Yes. It is unseasonably cold right now.
The last time I was here 6 years ago, we were literally jumping into shop fronts at pedestrian crossings waiting for the light to turn green. It was that warm, you couldn't stand the street. And as such, coming here this time, I packed a vest and a rain jacket for the bike rides in my suitcase and felt like an idiot for carrying them the whole way to Australia, thinking I won't need these. But I felt like a much bigger idiot when I got to the top of the climb yesterday morning, and I was freezing, and it was raining, and that rain jacket was back at the B&B still in the suitcase. So.
I do believe the weather is warming up for the weekend.
And then I'll be complaining about it being too hot. So.
Yeah, that's right. We just need that perfect middle ground, right? Without the wind. Group, anything from you before we wrap up?
No, I just said I agree with Ronan about the cold. I've just realised about us going to Port Elliot tomorrow, and we're talking about how cold it'll be down there. And I too haven't got anything to keep me warm. I've made the rookie mistake of forgetting my puffer jacket. And I remember several years ago in Victor Harbour, I was in the same situation, and I had to buy a hoodie for like $65, which I wore for 1 hour. Because when I was in there, because by the time I got to Adelaide, it was hot again, and it wasn't like the most fashionable hoodie either. I've got to say, I think I never wore it again. So I could see myself making a purchase I'll be regretting tomorrow when we get down there.
I'll look forward to hearing about that in a few days' time. Until then, though, a big thank you to everyone that supports what we do here at Escape Collective. This podcast and everything we do, from other podcasts to articles, it's all made possible by the wonderful members that we have all around the world. So thank you to everyone that has supported us. And if you haven't supported us but you like what we do, please think about signing up. That helps keep the lights on, as we say. We've got the Tour Down Under theme song.
Would it help with the heating?
Keep the lights on and the heating on. We've got the Tour Down Under theme song blaring away in the background. I feel like I've had enough of it, Rup.
You don't feel the rush?
No, I'm not feeling the rush. I was feeling it 8 years ago. I've had enough rushing.
Still working for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you've got to be grateful that it's a half decent theme tune, which you don't usually get. Usually when you get a theme tune for anything, especially bike races,
it's a lot better than the Rodania. Tour of Flanders. For people who complain about the Feel the Rush song, go to the Tour of Flanders and listen to the Rodania. It's not even a song, it's just a thing.
It's just a jingle.
They repeat that word.
One line.
Rodania, yeah.
On that note, it's getting freezing here, so we're going to call it a show. Thank you to everyone that has listened. Again, thanks to our Escape members, Ronan, Rup. Thanks to you guys for joining me.
Been a pleasure.
Pleasure.